This time in the Prop Master, well, I'll do something that I've been dreading for a long time. In fact, I've been putting this off for over 2 years, all the way back to the early days of the prototype build. Okay, actually it's not that big a deal. It's just these rocket thrusters. And they've been difficult, but in the end, it wasn't even that hard. So one of the reasons why it's been so difficult is that in my research, and I should probably point out when I'm doing research, it's not always like documents and everything. A lot of times it's just sketches with call-outs and things like that. And it's difficult to tell whether or not it's something from ILM with someone working on the actual jetpack, or if it's just someone that's been archived that is talking about ways of doing an early reproduction of the jetpack. And it's just almost impossible to tell sometimes. But either way, in my early research, I came across some notes that were showing that the top part here with this sphere and these parts here was actually from a children's toy. It was sort of a clear plastic thing with a light up spinny thing in the middle. And I've been looking for that toy for over 3 years. You know, whether or not it's online or at flea markets, or, you know, I've just been trying to find this forever. And I've finally just given up. There's just no way I was going to find anything that matched the description and looked anything like this at all. So in the end, I just figured out I had to figure out a different way of doing it. And I'm happy to say that in the end, after some difficult parts, I was able to come out with a fairly nice, streamlined, easy approach to making one from scratch. So, that's good news. But before I go on, this is the part that you're going to hate. This is where I beg you to interact with the video. The jetpack build is a bit more than a lot of people are willing to take on, and so my viewership has plummeted. It's just one fraction of what it used to be. So I kind of need those of you that are interested in the jetpack build and watching these videos, I kind of need you to step up and interact with these videos any way possible and as much as possible. So, like, subscribe if you haven't already, send this video to friends, other people, as many people as you can get away without getting yelled at by them. And probably the easiest and one of the most important ways you can do it is by leaving a comment. As many comments as you're willing to do. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, absolutely leave those and I'll interact with them as quickly as possible. But I need you to, interact any way you can, because my channel is kind of sinking down into a part of YouTube where most channels never get out of. And when you're stuck down there, YouTube doesn't send your videos out to anyone, so you don't get any new subscribers. And I really need to get the channel back up where it was if I'm going to continue to do this. And for those of you who are still watching this, I know it's been a long time since my last video, but it's not because I'm goofing off or on vacation or even have a lot of other work that I have to do instead of this. It's because this has been just a really difficult job to figure out how I was going to do it. There's been just tons of research, a whole lot of trial and error, but like I said before, in the end, we really came up with a nice, streamlined, easy approach to this. Now, I know I've been mostly talking about the scratch build, but I also have this. This is actually a kit that makes things a little bit easier, but we're going to go into how to make both of these in this video. Okay, honestly, I kind of ran out of time, so it's really just going to be about the scratch build. But even though it's fast and streamlined, we've still got a lot to do, so we better get to work. Okay, so what we're working on this time is going to be, we're going to make one of these. This is the rocket thruster that goes on the side of the jetpack, like this, only further down. It actually, attaches down here. And this is the part where if I was not working on a Boba Fett Jet Pack, if I was making a sort of generic Mandalorian backpack for a character that I, made myself, I think I would change this a little bit, and I would make the jetpack itself pretty much exactly the same as we've been doing, but for the thruster itself, I think I would abandon this, part that attaches to the side, and I would just put the rocket nozzles and maybe, half of one of these spheres on the very bottom of this tank down here like that. Basically the way they did it for the Mandalorian. I just think that's a more aesthetically pleasing design. I think if I were actually building, if you were actually building a real jetpack that would be used the way Boba Fett uses it, this is probably a more realistic design where this could be off to the side and have a huge amount of rotation to stabilize something that's on your back. But, we're not really flying this thing. We're just trying to make something that looks good. And I think if I were not doing Boba Fett, I would go that route. I would go the route of putting it, underneath this tank. But that's beside the point because I am making Boba Fett. And to make this part, there's basically two ways we can go about it. We have this area right here, which is basically a kit that I bought on Etsy early in the very beginnings of this project. And the downside to that is that it's fairly expensive for just, a thruster. Now the set that I bought, I think was like $80, but it had the two rocket nozzles, but it also had these dentals here, and also had, what you can't see, this, let me pan up here. It also had this section here, as well as the top area here, which we did not use because with these tanks, I think it just was too short. And then it also has the bottom pieces that we will be using, or that I will be using down at the bottom. So you get a fair amount of stuff for that amount of money. And those are some of the more difficult parts of the build. But like I mentioned before, I think this part here, you want to go ahead and make the way I made it here, not use those pieces. The advantage is this is the right size, it's the right shape, it has all these little details that'll make this exactly the way the actual prop looks. And those are all important, which is why I'm basically chosen to go this route. As you can see with this one, it's made out of these parts. Now these are very rough, they're going to take a lot of work to make it look good, but I'll walk you through all of that. The other way of going through it is sort of this area here, which you're going to make these out of sort of found items. And when you're doing that, I can tell you what these pieces are that I'm using and how to put them together, but you may want to walk through and find other items that you like better. When I'm doing this sort of build, what I'll do is I'll go to a big box store that has a lot of different products. In this case, I went to Walmart, but Target works well. I've done the same thing at Home Depot and Lowe's, other hardware stores. The important thing is that there's lots of products there. And then you just have to walk around and try to find products that look like what you need. Now, to give you a guide as to sizes on things, I have drawn out this diagram here that has all of the dimensions drawn on here. You might want to pause and take a screenshot of this image real quick so that you can print that out and have it. I can use this just to give you some sizes. I mean, you obviously have the diagram there, but I can also just walk through this. This central ball area here is going to be 2.5. I would say a range of things that'll work would be between 2.5 and 2 3/4 of an inch, which is 6.4 centimeters to about 7 centimeters. This part, I'm going to use a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. That's about 19 millimeters, but I don't know what the actual size of metric PVC pipes are. So it's just going to be a matter of, whatever's the closest to that. The same thing goes here. This will also be a PVC pipe. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch PVC pipe, which is pretty close to 12 millimeters. Now, when it comes to this part here, you want to try to find something with sloping sides. I'll kind of walk through what I found. But the important thing is that it needs to have a section that is 1 3/8 of an inch, which is about 35 millimeters, and that it tapers out. And the odds of finding the perfect taper are going to be pretty rare. So what I would do is I would find that, and then I would measure down to, if you go this direction, it's 3 1/4 inches, which is 83 millimeters or 8.3 centimeters. If you measure it diagonally from here to here, it is 3 5/16 of an inch, or about 8.4 centimeters. And those will be the things that you need to find. The other things, I think, for this kind of detail here, we're mostly going to draw that on. But I had those measurements on the diagram. Now, let's talk about some of the things that I found when I just walked around through Walmart. When I was walking through sort of the exercise area, that's the only place where I was lucky to find something that was sort of the right smoothness. It didn't have a texture on it. It's something that you could work up with pretty easily. And it's this right here. And this is a massage lacrosse ball, it's called. But it is 2 1/2 inches in diameter. It's about $5. I found it over with the other sort of massage equipment, like stretching and sort of hand massagers kind of an area. It's quite possible that it's called that because it's the size of a lacrosse ball, which that may or may not work as well. I don't know. But I found this, and that's what I'm going to go ahead and use for the sort of this ball section. Now, when it comes to this section, this sort of cone section here, just looking through the garage, I found this. This is a scrap piece that I did not use when I was doing the sort of the upper area on the jetpack right in here. This is not 100% perfect because it was just a scrap piece, and unfortunately I had already cut it off here, which is a little bit too wide. This is if I bought another funnel like I used here, I would make sure that I cut it shorter so that it had the right diameter across the top. Then like I said before, I'd measure down the 3 inches or 3 1/4 inches and cut it there. Now you're going to have the same difficulties that we had when we cut it originally, but at least you'll have that experience. Other things that you can use that I found when I was at Walmart is this wiffle ball bat. I think it was also about $5, $5 or $6, and it's it comes with a ball. Unfortunately, the ball is not the right size to use there. That would be a brilliant thing, but it has a texture and it's the wrong size. But depending on you're talking above or below, in the picture, I'd say right below where the grip is, you've got about the right diameter there, and then it flares out. I think it doesn't flare out as aggressively as the funnel does, but it would work, and I have heard of people using that for their jetpacks. I kept walking around, and this is not going to be the same shape, but if you wanted to make this less like the actual prototype or less like the actual prop and look even more realistic, I really like the shape of these SodaStream bottles that I found at Walmart over in the SodaStream area. If you're not familiar, this is a machine that lets you carbonate your own beverages. So if you want to make your own soft drinks, or if you want to carbonate your own water to make soda, you can do that. But I think that the size of these bottles maybe just a tad bit big at the top, but it's close enough. And I really like the shape that they are. They look very realistic, much more realistic than the prop itself and the parts that I'll be using. So if you wanted to go that route, that would be a good way to do it. The other thing you do is you just walk around, keep those shapes in mind. It's good to carry a tape measure with you so you can take some measurements. As I found here and most places that sell lots of products, if you don't remember to bring a tape measure, you can go over in the hardware section and grab a tape measure from there, use it, and then just put it back before you leave. Now with all that said and done, sort of just, you know, walking through and finding things, you come back. Oh, and obviously I'm using these PVC pipes like I said earlier. And I've got a little washer here that we'll talk about a little bit later. Now I would strongly recommend going this route. I think it's going to be able to secure it better. It looks more like the actual part. You don't have to go through a lot of time just looking blindly for things. But if you don't want to spend the money, or you really want that I built every part of this kind of a feeling that you will get, then you can go this route. And with that said, let's go ahead and put this one together first, and then we'll come back and do this one. So the first part we're going to do is work on the sphere part, that little ball part at the top of the thruster. There's going to be several different ways that you can go about marking. I mean, technically any part of the sphere is the center of the sphere, but you can either use a compass to draw a line that is 3/4 of an inch in diameter, or we can go this route, which is something that works pretty well if you have a drill press. If you don't have a drill press, I would probably suggest going with the using a compass to just draw a circle somewhere, on the sphere. But to do this, I've got my largest bit. I don't know if you can see this. It's a 1-inch spade bit. That's just the largest bit. That's just going to make the largest hole in something that I can do. So I've got a small piece of wood here, and I use this bit to drill, that hole there. That's going to be just me. That's going to let me hold the ball in place. Now I'm going to change this bit out with a 3/4 inch, which is 22 millimeters hole saw. And in this case, we do not want this pilot hole right here. We don't want to have a hole in the center. So we need to remove that, and that's pretty simple. If you can see right here, there is a little set key. Let me see if I can find a flashlight real quick. So there's just a little Allen wrench bolt or screw in there, and we need to remove that, and that'll let this drop out. Okay, with that out of the way, you might want to tighten this in. I just don't want it to get loose and fly out while this is spinning. Now here is my, a massage lacrosse ball that I got at Walmart. Now this is something that will work really well for a solid object. Technically it would work also with a hollow object, but we'll have to do some things a little bit different later on. Okay, now that I have my piece here, now this is a very solid ball. It has a little bit of flex to it because I think the outside is a hard rubber, but it is slightly spongy. There is, if I push down, it will push down, but for the most part, it is a solid thing. And that's the whole point. The reason why I wanted to do this all in one shot was you mount this, you drill the hole, and then you change out your bit. That way, when you lay that there, it will make sure that this is perfectly centered with this and your hole won't be slightly off. And I'm just going to hold this as, you know, if I push it, I can move it around, but if I kind of hold it as neutral as possible where it won't move, then I don't want to drill very deeply, probably only about the depth of the teeth. You know, I only want to go down maybe 4 millimeters, you know, about 1/8 of an inch, somewhere, you know, in that area. Okay, and the whole reason why I wanted to do that instead of drawing a line is because it's going to give me a little bit of actual relief to it. Make that where you can see it a little bit better. Now we can pull this off and go on to the next step. Okay, for no other reason than it'll make it easier for you to see, I'm going to take my marker and I'm just going to put it in that groove and draw around. That just makes it a little bit easier for you to see what's going on. Using this circle, I need to sort of cut straight across evenly to flatten this curve out. And I know that sounds daunting, but it's really not that difficult. Using a small knife, you can, by using the circle as a guide, just make sure you don't go more than that. You can kind of saw back and forth slowly. Oh, see, I started to go over the line, so I stopped. And what I'm doing now is I'm basically rotating the ball and leaving the knife in one place. You want to go very slowly and try to keep the blade right up against the edge. It was distorting so much because there's so little of the surface left where I was cutting that I'm going to start over on this side. Okay, now that's not the prettiest, you know, flat area, but that's okay. There's a little bit of a ridge right here, so I am going to smooth that out a little bit. Okay, and now we have a flat section to that. Now if you want, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can take your knife and cut down into this so that you're cutting down into the rubber. And if you go a little bit past the cut you made here, that's okay. You're just going to undercut it a little bit and that'll be fine. What I want to do, if you do this all the way around, I can actually cut a recess into the ball. Always be careful when using, you know, razor knives and X-Acto knives. These things are extremely sharp. This kind of helps in that I can make the blade quite short if I want to. So now I've got that edge recessed in all the way around. Now I can kind of come in and cut into this part that's sticking up in the middle. This will not be a perfectly flat area, but once again, I think it's going to be fine. Try not to cut down too far. Because what we're going to do is we're going to drop a washer into here. Okay, so here's our washer, and it will fit right down into that. And once again, this is all just part of giving some relief to this. And if you do a really bad job of that, you can always go in and put a little bit of hot glue, make sure that's, you know, really hot glue, and it will level up that area. But we don't have to worry about that right now. Now this would be a good time to talk about alternatives to this. On Etsy, you can buy the whole thing, or you can buy little pieces like this that will fit into here. But I'm going to show you how to use a washer. Okay, so here's my washer, and let's talk about this particular washer. You want one that has a fairly large hole compared to the diameter of the whole washer. You know, this is a fender fender washer style, so you have a much smaller hole compared to the overall diameter. You want something that's more like this, where you have much less metal in the washer itself. The actual dimensions of this, the overall diameter, which I lied earlier, the hole saw size is 7/8 of an inch, not 3/4 of an inch. I got the millimeters right, but not the inches. So you want a washer that is and I have a file here that is, this came with a whole set of little files. They're not particularly expensive. They're very handy. This one is, 7/64 of an inch, which is 3 millimeters. You can just kind of see which one kind of looks like that. And I debated as to whether or not I should glue this into the ball first and have it sticking up a little bit, and then use that to hold on to this while I file it. But I decided that you're more likely to scratch up the ball that way. You might want to go that way. If you do not have a vise, I would definitely say go that way. So glue it in, but glue it in where it sticks out of the ball a little bit, and then you can use that area to, use that to hold it while you file this. Now I have this in this vise fairly tight, but not so tight that it's going to bend in half, because remember, I'm about to remove some material out of this middle part, which is have the most force going through it, and I'm about to weaken it. So if you have this super tight, it won't move at all, but it might fold in half when you file this down. And I'm just doing this by eye. You could measure it and make marks, but I'm just gonna do this by eye to what it looks like is about the middle. And I'm gonna start by just going one direction. It would help if I made it the same direction. By the way, if you don't have any files like this or can't find any, you can often find at the edge of a file. If you find a small file, you can do the same thing with that. This is a little bit thicker, but I think it would still work. But this obviously is going to be much more expensive than the little files. Oops, that was bad. It's easier for me to make sure I'm straight when I'm just going in one direction. And eventually you'll start to get a bit of a groove in there, and then you can start going both directions. I was trying to get it toward the top so that my hand would fit in there a little better, but it doesn't need to be that close to the top, so this way hopefully it won't pop out again. And once you feel like you have a little bit of a groove in there, you can go back and forth. But if you notice that it starts to move around a lot, go back to just going one direction. It also might be helpful to just do one side first and then go to the other side. Just make sure you keep them lined up. Looks like I'm a little bit sloppier on this side than I am on this side, so I'm going to spend some time defining this side a little better. I feel like I'm cutting in up here but not down here, so I'm going to tilt it a little bit so that I've got an edge cutting in there. By the way, this is a sort of a square file. It's got sharp corners all the way around. If you could find a really small flat file, that would work just as well. Obviously, if you had aluminum, if you could find some aluminum washers, that would be much easier to work with. These are stainless steel. This is just a washer that I found, but it's very hard, whereas an aluminum washer would be much easier to work with, but more expensive and harder to find. Okay, now I'm going to turn this 90 degrees and do the same thing again. Once again, I'm not measuring or making any marks, but you could do that. And I'm just using my eyes to line that up. If I was smart, I would do it down on this end so that my fingers aren't bashing into the vise the whole time. I'm basically just hitting this one side. This doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, this is one tiny detail in what's going to be your entire Boba Fett costume. So it's not going to be something that everyone is, staring at and really, going to critique. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, I've got a good edge on this side, but not on this side, so let's work on that a little bit. And good edge on both sides here. Okay. Okay, so here's our piece with a little rough, it's got a bit of a rough surface there, but that's okay, because now we're just going to glue our washer into there. And for this, I would definitely suggest hot glue. I guess the other thing you could do would be maybe to use barge glue, because that also has some flex to it. I don't think for this, because this is a ever so slightly flexible surface, you don't want something that's really rigid like super glue, although that would probably still work in a pinch. But I'm just going to take my hot glue and I'm putting it on here just because I don't want it to harden prematurely on the metal of the washer. You don't want to put too much, and then I'm just going to drop this into place and push it in, making sure that it's flat. I don't want it to, that bottom piece is not perfectly level, so I don't want this to like go in at a weird angle or anything like that. So now if you do this with something that's hollow, what I would do would be to take the piece, when you cut this out with the hole saw originally, I would take that piece that was cut out and I would glue that to the bottom of the washer, and then I would probably use super glue around the outside of the washer and glue it to the edges here. That would give you the same effect. Now that that's pretty much in place. I'm going to see if I can't clean out any extra super glue there, or hot glue. Or what I could do is, I'm tempted to try maybe put a little bit of hot glue in there just to level things off. I just need a stick or something to pull some of it out. I don't think that worked. Okay, I've just got a little piece of a tongue depressor that I split down the middle, and I took some scissors and cut the end off so that it's square. I'm going to use that to sort of, oh, that's not good. Let's try that again. I'm wondering if this isn't going to stick. The ball's kind of a mystery surface. Okay. I don't think it's coming out except for maybe by dragging up, you know, like I was doing here where I was trying to pry up that other hot glue. This is not like it's going to have a lot of stress on it or anything. Basically just the weight of that washer. And that feels pretty level. It doesn't feel to be sticking up anywhere. There is some flex there, so I wonder. I think the best thing to do is just wait until that has some time to completely cool off, and then we'll see where we are then. Okay, I came back after quite a long time, and just to see if I could pull some of the hot glue that was in there out, and once again the whole thing just came out. So the hot glue does not want to stick to this rubber surface. So I decided to try the barge glue, or the barge cement. So I got the barge cement, and it would not, even when it was still wet, would not stick to this surface. Just trying to spread it around, and it just peeled up. So out of some desperation, and before I'd tried to spray that whole area with some primer, I just tried the gel super glue, and it has completely stuck on there quite tightly. So that's good. At least the super glue does work. That has me somewhat concerned because I was kind of counting on the hot glue to be able to glue all these parts together. But we'll see how the super glue works. And if that's going to be a problem, then we'll tackle that when we get to it. But now that we have this glued on, I think we're pretty much done with the front part of this, because all of this I'm going to actually draw on after we paint this basically silver like this. So probably the next thing to do is to go ahead and glue this part of the funnel on, or whatever you're using for your cone, onto the ball. Yeah, that makes sense. That way we can go ahead and find out right now whether or not this is going to be an issue, and if we have to figure out a different way of doing it. Now, if you'll recall, this is a little bit wide at the top because this is just a scrap piece of the funnel that I had laying around. If you do this with a funnel or whatever you use, make sure that you start off with the correct measurement at the top so that it will be, you know, much more that sort of shape than how thick this is. But honestly, if I didn't know what it was supposed to look like, I think this would look absolutely fine. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. What we do want to worry about is making sure that this at least appears to be perfectly, you know, vertical here and horizontal here, and that we make sure that this is facing sort of 90 degrees from that. That's going to be the most difficult part of all of these, is making sure that everything is, you know, you don't want to mount this to the side of the jetpack and have it basically, you know, pointing down like that or off to the side. We need to make sure that everything looks 90 degrees to each other. It's not important that it actually be 90 degrees, it just has to look like it's 90 degrees. I think that looks pretty good there. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to hold this in position and put the super glue down along that seam on the inside. And then I'm going to hit it with some zip kicker. With any luck, no, that is not what I was hoping it was going to happen. Okay, we're going to have to work on doing this a little bit more. I think we're still going to use glue, but we're going to have to do it in more of a physical connection. Okay, I did some experimenting on the other ball that I have, and luckily the primer will stick to this, so it'll be good for painting, but it does not stick well enough for us to glue things to it and then have it hold really well. So we're going to attach this a different way. I also did some more research on finding alternatives to this, and I did find a website that had 2.5-inch wooden spheres. It's called woodpeckerscrafts.com, all one word, and they're about the same price, about $5 each. Previously, when I found some wooden spheres online, they were about $20 a piece, so I thought that was ridiculous. So this is actually a pretty good deal. So once again, that is Woodpeckers Crafts, all one word, and that is Woodpeckers, plural, crafts, one word, .com. And just, look up the 2.5-inch wooden sphere. Now, if you go that route, I would do this part the same way as we did here, but instead of using a 7/8 inch hole saw, I would use a 7/8 inch Forstner bit like this. That's going to give you a really nice flat, indention here. Now this, unlike the hole saw, will give you a little, I don't know if you can kind of see it, it'll give you a little hole right in the middle, but we can fill that pretty easily with some putty, pretty much right after. So do that, and then you can glue your washer into there just like we did with this. And if you go that route, this will all be a lot easier, where you can just basically, glue your funnel directly onto it with either hot glue or super glue. But I don't have that, and I don't have time to order it, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed with this, and I'll show you how I'm going to attach this. So once again, the important thing is to try to line this all up. I think that looks pretty good. Now this time, instead of trying to glue this on, I'm just going to hold it in position, and I'm going to take a pen and I'm going to mark the inside of this. Should have done a little better job of cleaning the super glue off, make kind of a rough circle, but so now I have that marked. Now let's go back over to the drill press and go from there. Okay, I was going to come over here, and the plan was to drill 3 holes with a fairly large bit, and then it dawned on me that it would be a lot easier to take a lag screw. And what I'll do instead is I'll drill 1 hole that is, the drill bit is the size of the, you want a hole to be the size of the screw without the threads, and then just the threads will cut their way into the ball. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. Okay, and then now we can just thread this into there. Make this a little easier on my hands. Okay, that should be plenty. Now the hot glue will fill into here, and it will also, in itself will keep this from being able to be pulled off without going through the trouble of drilling all the other holes. So let's move back over to the work area, and we can do that. The next thing I would do is I would take this piece here, and I've got just a little file, and I'm just going to kind of bevel this inside edge so that I've got a bit more surface area on the top of the ball. And this file's got a semicircle, it's flat at the top and a curve at the bottom. And I'm using that curved side. I'm not trying to make this perfect. I just want to take that, that one edge off. And it's actually a lot quicker than you think. Okay, now I'm going to use some gel super glue just to kind of hold it in place. Try not to get too much of it on the outside edge. And then using the circle to line everything up, put this in place. That looks pretty good from what I can tell. And we'll have to wait a minute or two for that to cure. I don't want to spray any zip kicker in there because I don't want to interfere with the hot glue's ability to stick to stuff. So I'll give that a few minutes and then we'll take a look. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes, and by now my hot glue should be hot. And I don't want to move this around. I don't want to check and see if that's actually glued. I just, going to start putting some hot glue in here. And there's no reason to use your construction grade hot glue on this. If that's all you have, that'll be fine, but just regular hot glue will work fine for this part. You could also use epoxy if you had some sort of two-part epoxy mix. You could use that. My hot glue is cooling off. Let me get a flashlight so I can see in there a little bit better. Okay, we're almost there. I'm going to let my hot glue gun warm up a little bit more because it was getting really difficult for me to push the hot glue through. Okay, it's been about 2 minutes, and I think my hot glue gun has warmed back up again. I'm going to go around the outside and make sure that I'm not just making a big mound on top of the bolt itself. You don't want to get this too full because, you need that cone to be empty. I want enough hot glue in there that it will sort of self-level. Now we can just wait for that to cool. Okay, while we wait for that to cool, and don't rush that, we just put a lot of hot glue in there. It's going to have a lot of heat. It may take an hour just to cool off. And maybe another hour after that to get to its full strength. But while we're waiting for that, this is a piece of the same aluminum that this tube right here is made from. And this is some 60 grit, fairly coarse sandpaper. I want to wrap that around there. This is the piece that is going to attach our rocket nozzle to the side of the jetpack. And instead of being flat on the end, we want to put a curve into that so that it will fit snugly up against the aluminum tube. And that's easy to do. We just wrap this around the tube and then do this. Now, you want to be a little bit careful while you're doing this because we need to try to hold this as as close to a 90-degree angle to that as possible, because we don't want this at an angle when we, attach the thrusters on there. Okay, you can see that's got the right curve all the way around. Now from one edge to the other edge, and we can put it on there and see that that looks pretty close to 90 degrees. I'm not sure how close. It's not 100% probably, but it's close enough. It just has to look right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but let's hold up a 1, 2, 3 block. So it's a little bit leaning that way. So if we wanted to, we could take some of this end off. So let's give a little bit more pressure on this far end. Okay, that looks really good. And now we have that. And once the hot glue cools on the other piece, we can go ahead and move on. So actually, while that's continuing to cool off, let's work on this. This is the other PVC pipe that we're going to attach to the sphere. So a 1/2-inch PVC, which is about 12 millimeters, and then it's a 1/2 inch long. So I would say whatever size PVC is close to 12 millimeters if you're using metric, and then cut it off at 12 millimeters. Now you notice this doesn't look like a square. You have to remember that a 1/2 inch PVC is the internal diameter, not the external diameter. So we have this, and we're going to put a groove right down the middle of it. And so let's move over to the vise. Okay, here we got the vise, but before we can put this in there, I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to take my pen, use a pencil, whatever you want to use, and I put my middle finger on that edge, and I'm just going to hold this to what looks like pretty close to the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly the middle, just sort of in the middle area. And I'm going to rotate this around, keeping pressure on my middle finger. And of course, it's more difficult on camera. And go all the way around. And that's just going to give me the guideline that I want to use to cut this channel. And I've been trying to come up with different ways of doing this. At first, I thought I would just cut this into smaller sections and then put a dowel in the middle, and that would work, except for there would be so little PVC left to try to glue to the dowel, and the dowel can't come all the way out to the outside because this has to glue onto the sphere, that I don't think that's going to be the way to go. I think that's going to be a little bit fragile. And as far as cutting the groove, everything I can think of just seems more and more dangerous than the last thing. So I think we're back down to using that same little file that we used before to cut a groove all the way around this. And I have tried this, and it's not as hard as it sounds. So what you want to do is just line this onto your line, and don't push down very hard, because it gets really hard to push and then you go off in weird directions. So just lay it on there and lightly go in one direction. It's going to take a little bit of time to start. Try to keep it on that line. And then after a little bit, now you can start to push down. And then now you can go back and forth. You don't need to go that deep because remember, we don't want to cut all the way through this PVC pipe. We want to go down about 1/16 of an inch, which is about 1.5 millimeters. Now, alternatively, if you don't want to do this, you could just paint a black line around here at the end, and that would probably work for, 90% of the time. Okay, now you'll be tempted to then just try to go around. Don't do that. We want to take this out of the vise and turn it maybe a 1/16 of a turn, or I'm sorry, make that 1/8 of a turn, and start all over again. It can be helpful to lift off and make sure that you're still in line with your mark. Okay, and go another 1/8 of a turn and start over again. Once you have a groove in there, you need to be trying to use the entire length of the file because you have a tendency to clog up the little teeth with the PVC. Also helps if I have 4 equal sides here, so I can rotate that to a clean side pretty easily. And you'll find that once you kind of get in a groove, you can do about one of these a minute. So, we're talking 8 minutes to do all of these. But I'll finish going all the way around and I'll be back. Now that I've gone all the way around, you can start to connect the two. I did one here, I did one there, so we'll kind of go in between. And there's enough of a groove that it'll keep everything in place. If you start to feel that your file's getting really hot, just stop for a second. Because if it gets really hot, it doesn't cut cleanly into the PVC. It just starts to melt things and slide over the top of it. So just pause for a second and let it cool off, and then you can start up again. Not to mention it gets really hot. Once you get kind of down there, then you start going back and forth to smooth everything out. Let me rephrase that. Basically, when you get that corner down to where it's kind of even in height as these are, then you can kind of start going back and forth to round that out. And let me finish going all the way around this way and I'll be back again. Now that we have all of these corners cut down and sort of rounded over, I'm going to hold this, I'm going to take it out of the vise, hold it in my hand, and I just want to sort of run this around the whole thing. I'm just watching to see if there's any areas where it sticks up a little too high. Oh, also a tip while you're filing this down in the vise, if it starts to feel like you're not cutting, you're sort of running on top of a bunch of ball bearings or that kind of a feeling like you're just rolling on top of stuff, stop going back and forth and just start with going in one direction, and you'll remove whatever that material is and push it out of the way. Because sometimes you'll be doing this and you will just sort of form some little rollers underneath there and you'll just roll over the top of it. But let's continue to just go all the way around here, making sure everything is smooth. And if you mess this up, just cut another piece and start again. That looks pretty good to me. So now what I want to do is take one of my sanding sticks and doing in a circular pattern, although I don't know, you don't necessarily have to do that, but I'm just going to go over this whole surface and kind of try to knock this edge of stuff that's, you know, still attached. And we're almost done, but not quite. Now I'm going to take this round file, and I'm not going to put it in the vise, but I'm just going to hold it here. I may put it in the vise later, but I'm just going to lightly run this over the top. I'm not trying to round this whole thing off. I just want to take that edge that's on there and, you know, kind of bevel that edge so it's not a 90-degree angle. I'm not pushing down hardly at all. Okay, I think that worked out pretty well. And there's your part. The whole thing took maybe 20-25 minutes, probably less than that, to be honest. And now we can, this is ready to be attached onto the sphere once the sphere is cooled off. Okay, now that this is completely cooled off, it's really well attached. So I'm happy about that. But now that all that's taken care of, and we've got these in the right shapes, we need to figure out where to put these onto here. And that's easier said than done. But I think I've finally figured out something that's going to work pretty well for everyone. Otherwise, it's just sort of guesswork. And here's what I want you to do. You need to take a piece of wood and cut it as it needs to be as flat as possible, or, you know, as you know, even width as possible. And you need to cut it 1 13/64 of an inch high, which is 30.5 millimeters. I went with millimeters. It was just easier to do. So if you have that ability, I would definitely go with millimeters on this one. And you want to be 1/2 millimeter accurate. I mean, it's not going to kill you if you were, you know, say 31 millimeters or 30 millimeters, but you'll be better off if you're 30.5 millimeters. And what you want to do, we have to adjust this a little bit, is you want to set this down onto this flat surface here. And make sure that stays flat. Now you take your block that you cut and lay it up against it. And let's go with a pencil. And you want to just sort of score a line, or, you know, mark a line along the top of that block. Come over and do the same thing over here. Okay, we've got our lines. And that should give us the middle from front to back. Now, that's if you recessed this washer. If you did not recess this washer and you just laid that onto the flat edge that you sanded into the front, then you want to add 1/2 of the width of that washer onto the size of this block. If you don't do that, it's not going to be totally off, but you know, it won't be horrible, but it will be not centered. And that gives us that. Now we want to mark, you know, how high up from the ground it is. And that was really difficult with the sphere, but it's a lot easier now that it's attached to this cone. Now, before you do this, you might want to take a look at your cone and make sure it looks symmetrical and it doesn't look, you know, kind of cocked or anything. So make sure that that all looks, you know, well balanced and symmetrical. And if it does, then you can go ahead and do this part. And that is, the first thing you want to do, and I've already done it here, is take your pencil and just sort of connect these lines. You can use a ruler if you want to, but it doesn't have to be that precise, and it is going to be difficult to get that, you know, accurate when it's kind of a deep hole here. It shouldn't be that deep, but you know, you see what I'm trying to say. But so connect those lines and then connect these lines just to get that center point. Now, if you use the Forstner bit for a wooden sphere, then you're going to already have that dot picked out. You know, it'll already be there. And you want to just measure from the bottom of your cone to the center of that spot. Now, obviously, the straighter you are with this, the more accurate this is going to be. And that is about, I'm going to say that's 4 3/16. Now come over to that line that you drew, which should be now up and down, and make that mark on the side here, which is hard for me to do on camera. Let's see if I can get down here. Spin this around and do the same thing over here. Okay. Now I'm going to take a marker and I'm just going to put a mark on those spots. Now I've changed the way I'm going to do this from my original plan. And now I wish that I hadn't gone so deep with the lag screw that's down here. Because from what I can figure, that lag screw goes directly to the very middle of this sphere, and that's going to be a problem for me because I want to drill all the way through here, and that could be a problem, but we'll have to find out and see. There's not much I can do about it at this point. So when you do this, it would be better for the screw to stick down a little bit further. You know, don't screw the screw in so deep that it goes all the way to the middle of the sphere. Now we've got to go back over to the drill press. You could do this by hand, but it's going to be a lot easier with the drill press. So we still have our setup here, and I want to put this 4-inch lag bolt. This is a 1/4 inch thick, 4 inches long lag bolt. And that is 6mm width by 100mm length. Now the width isn't that important, whatever size you can find that's going to work, but the length is important. The other thing that's important is that you can fit this bolt in, you know, the hex end into this piece here. If this is too big and won't fit, that's not going to work. So the thing is, you want to go with a larger drill bit than you have here. This is a 1/4 inch. A 1/4 inch drill bit's going to make a hole in this soft rubber that's way too small for this. So you want to go larger. This is a 1/4 inch, so this is 21/64 of an inch. In metric, this is a 6mm, and this is an 8mm. So a little less than 50% larger drill bit than what you're trying to put through the ball. Now, if you're using a wooden sphere, then you can go ahead and just use a 1/4 inch drill bit for a 1/4 inch lag bolt. Now, my drill press will not, it only has a 2-inch movement. I can only move this down 2 inches, which is not enough to go all the way through this ball. So I'm gonna have to go in on one side and then go in from the other side, which of course you have to do the same thing if you're doing this by hand. So I don't want to go more than halfway through here, because if I go more than halfway through here and they don't meet perfectly in the middle, then when I'm trying to put the bolt through there, it's going to have a tendency to go continuing on the hole that I drilled and not follow the hole from the other side. So I've got this set to only go down 1 1/4 inches, which is half of the diameter of the sphere. You can do the same thing with a hand drill, or if you have a drill press that doesn't have the ability to adjust how deep it goes, just take some tape, measure up 1¼ inches on your bit, and you can either mark that with a bright colored marker, or you can take a piece of tape and tape around that so that you can see where to stop drilling. Once again, I've got my little setup here that I had from the very beginning that'll allow me to place this, and it'll hold it in the right spot to be perfectly centered, so that wherever I drill, it's going to be headed for the center of the sphere. That's sort of the beauty of that. So don't disassemble this until you really need to. Now, it's important, I have this set to only go down 1¼ inches, but that means I need to make sure that my bit is practically touching the ball itself to start off with. And I've got a little bit of a gap there, so let's loosen this. And I need it to be up a little bit just so that I can see and make sure that it's hitting in the right place. And then I just need to line this up so that it is as close to the dot as I can possibly get it. Now, my worry is that I'm going to hit that right about the middle. I'm going to hit that piece of screw. It won't be very much of the screw, just the very tip of that lag screw that I put in here. And hopefully that doesn't throw everything all over the place. I'm trying to figure out how I can hold this and still let you see it. Okay, and I could feel it hit that screw at the very end of that throw. And let's flip it over here. By the way, I'm holding this way so that the cone does not interfere with the position of the ball. If I try to go this way, I can only rotate that until the cone hits. So if you're having problems with that, you may have to do this a second time with a smaller piece of wood, you know, a narrower piece of wood, so that you can fit the ball in there without the cone interfering. I think I rubbed my little dot off, so I'm going to make it a little darker. Okay, it looks pretty good. Now, oddly enough, I did not feel that hit the screw that time. And it is still set to the right depth. Now, as you might expect, that did not go 100% through. There's a tiny little bit of rubber left in between there. So I'm going to take this file. You could also clamp this into a vise or in some vice grips or something, and do that as well, as if you don't have a vise, or if you don't have a file, little round file like this. Okay, so I have my file in the vise, and I'm just going to see if I can get this to get. First of all, it's going to punch through the small amount of rubber, and hopefully I can use it to grind away the tip of that lag screw that we put in to hold this on. If you don't put your lag screw in so deep, I mean, you want it to be as deep as you can go, but not so deep that it gets to the middle, you know, the core. And you can probably hear it scratching on there. I'm going to get down to the thicker part of the file. This file has kind of a screw type. The part that actually, you know, removes material is in a sort of a helix. So you can kind of screw this down onto there. But now I want to have it remove material. So I'm going to continue to screw in that direction, but I'm going to try and pull this up while I'm doing it. Or at the very least, stop it from moving down. I am very pleased with the fact that it seemed to go easily pretty much through to the edge. It's quite possible that when you do it, that there won't be a perfect line up, and you'll have to go about halfway and kind of move everything around to get it to continue out the other hole. And if that's the case, you want to do basically the same thing that I'm doing right now, because you're wanting to remove, you'll have, you know, sort of two angles that don't quite line up. So you put the piece all the way through, and then by using the file or the lag bolt, you can sort of cut a path that's in a straight line for it to go. Okay, that seems to be working pretty easily now. So I think I can get my lag bolt through there. Now at this point you have to decide whether or not this is going to be your left side thruster or your right side thruster. I think I'm going to make this the right side thruster. So I want the head of this hex nut or lag bolt to go on the outside. So this will be the right side thruster, so I want this to be on the right side. I'm gonna use this to sort of screw it in there. Okay, and that's just sticking up a little bit. So glue can definitely get underneath there, and if I lay that on top of there, it is not anywhere near flush with the top of this. That's important because when we fill this with hot glue, we don't want to fill it all the way to the top. We want there to be a little indentation here on the end. So I like that. That also looks pretty horizontal. I'm quite happy with that. And we can actually start to put these pieces on now. Okay, so here's our piece, and I've just got a piece of scrap wood that I've drilled a 1/4 inch hole in, because this is a 1/4 inch lag bolt, and that works pretty good for holding this upright. And here's my piece here. The end's a little bit nicer on this end, so I'll make this the end that goes out. Also, as it turns out, I've got a larger space here and a thinner space here. I think that would look better, you know, coming out of, you know, this being the outside part. So this just became the outside. I just want to, looking down from above, gonna hold that in a spot where it looks like it's perfectly centered with the head of the lag bolt. And that looks pretty good from the front as well. I'm pretty happy with that placement. So I'm just going to take my hot glue, and I want to make sure this gets underneath the bolt. In fact, I guess I can actually move and make sure there's tons of room underneath there, to be honest. Now I can make sure it's all lined up good. Although I will say it is harder not being able to see as well. What I probably should have done was to line that up and then mark around the outside so that I could use those lines to line everything up with. So keep that in mind. I'm just trying to clean this up a little bit so I can see better. Also, I really want the outside edge of this to be nice and clean. So when you do it, line it up good, and then put a mark around the outside. Then you can move it off center to put the glue in underneath, move it back into position, and then we can fill this up with glue until it is sort of level with the top of the screw. And then to smooth it out, I can always smooth it out with a little modeling putty or something like that. Even caulking would work. So I'll let that cool off for an hour, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Okay, it's been a little over an hour, and that actually looks pretty good. It's definitely set up, and it's secure. It's a little rough. It didn't exactly self-level, but you know, we can smooth all that out in the next step after this one. So let's, I guess I've got a little scrap piece of PVC. It's maybe a little tall, but it'll work. Just setting it underneath there to make this sort of stable. Now, this is important that we make sure that we line, remember when we sanded that curve into that, we need to make sure that that is in the same line as the thruster. I'm just gonna get that on there where it fits good. That'll just help me visualize. Actually, what I should do, I have that, put this on here tight. I can't see that. Now I'm going to mark the front edge and the back edge so I can just kind of see. That'll help me make sure this is lined up properly. Now I don't have to worry about any getting underneath the head of a bolt or anything, but I do want to make sure that it is in line perfectly and as centered as I can get it. If I'm not blocking you too bad. Now I want to make sure not to get any hot glue on the threads that are above the PVC. So I'm going to come way out to the side here. Oh, and I messed up already. I think this might make life a little bit easier if I mark the tops. And I don't want to get it so high that it's into these low spaces here. This will keep everything centered and will help to anchor everything in place. The hot glue will stick to the PVC and it will stick to the threads in that piece, and that should make this pretty darn tight. Okay. Now this piece there's more mass there, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that overnight. It's reasonably late today, and I'll be back in the morning. Well, it's been about 12 hours and everything is solid. And we have our bolt coming out here that we'll be able to use to attach it to the sides of the jetpack. We'll drill a hole there and then we'll put a nut on the inside of that. And we're pretty close to finish with this. There's a couple of things that we still need to do. Let's just compare this to the other one. And I think it looks pretty good. Now, as you can see, this is shorter, but it's not because this is the wrong size. It's because this is this was a scrap, and so it starts out lower than it really should have been cut. That makes the opening of this larger, which means the sphere sinks further down into it, and that's the difference in height. And this will look more like this after it's painted. But there is a couple things we need to do before we can paint that. One of them is, if you notice, there's some gapping in these corners, only because this is curved and that's flat. So there's a little gap there that we need to fill. And we can fill that with caulking. You could fill it with baking soda and CA glue, but it'd be hard to get those curves. It all wants to fall out. What I like to use for this kind of thing, and I've only discovered it recently because I'm not a huge model builder, and that is modeling putty. And it's sort of something that I've been wanting for a long time, something that a putty that I can put on somewhere, let it dry, and then sand it flat. This isn't 100% that, because it only works you can only put like thin layers on. You can't put like a big glob on there. I mean, I suppose you could, but you have to wait a long time for it to cure. Now, my favorite of these model putties is this Tamiya. This stuff works really, really well. But there are others on the market. There's this brand here, which is, I think, the cheapest of all of them that I've found. And then another popular one is this Mr. White putty. which is a Mr. Hobby product, I guess. And they all work pretty well. Like I said, this is probably my favorite, but the one that I end up using quite a lot is this one here, for no other reason than I like the applicator. And we've got a little pressure on there. Yeah, I like this applicator, this nozzle. For things like this, it really makes it easy for me to go in and put a small bead all the way around it. Where with the Tamiya, even though I think the putty's better on the Tamiya, I'll have to take like a spatula or like a putty knife and go in there and try to fill it in to those gaps. And that's just not as convenient or precise for these things. So it's kind of up to you as to which one you have access to and which one you want to use. You can find all of these in hobby shops, model building stores, that kind of thing. Oddly enough, I had a harder time finding the Tamiya. I had to order that online on Amazon. But I think I found this one at Hobby Lobby. They're all pretty easy to get. But even before I fill in these gaps, there's one thing that I'm going to do, and you can do this or you don't have to do this. And that is on the inside down here. This would work. You could paint that black and it would be fine, or gray, it would be fine. But if you look in the actual one, you've got like a flat spot with a hole in the middle of it. And so to get something like that, I'm just going to take this 2-inch fender washer and it fits perfectly into there. Now, in my case, I've got a lot of glue in there, so it actually it's still the right size, but it fits, it's like touching the glue. Whereas if you had a little bit less glue in there, then there wouldn't be, the glue right there up against it, and there'd be just a hole there. And you can still just paint that black and it'll be just fine. Or you could just not do it at all and just, drill a hole into that later on, or you just paint a black dot on there. But this is simple enough, and I've got this washer, so I'm going to go ahead and just glue this in place real quick. Make sure that's laying in there flat. Now, obviously, if you don't have glue right there, what you'll need to do is put the glue on the outside edge of the washer, and then place it down in there so that it's glued up against the sides, not against this other hot glue. And now we can go ahead and go on to filling these gaps. Okay, so I've got my putty here. You notice I'm wearing a glove. This is not water-based. This is a solvent-based putty. So if you have, it can cause some skin irritation. I have used it on my bare skin and it has not really bothered me. But if you have, if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, then it can definitely irritate your skin. Also, use this in a well-ventilated area. There are definitely some fumes and they're flammable. The main thing is with the glove, it's a lot easier for me to, instead of me going to wash my hands afterwards, I can just take the glove off. So I just take the applicator and, hold on, it seems to have separated a little bit since I've used it last. Okay, now let me just run a little bead around here. And if you're trying to simulate a weld, you can kind of just do that in some cases. But I'm gonna go ahead and do this side as well. Definitely want to try to get it into the gap if I can. I'm trying to do this so that you can see what I'm doing. And this stuff will start to form a skin pretty quickly, so you want to work reasonably fast. And you've got a choice. You can either use something like this little putty knife here and get in there and just kind of push it into the gaps and remove any excess. Or you can do what I'm about to do, which is use your finger. Your pinky, I find, works the best for this just because it's a little bit more narrow. And you're going to make a little bit of a mess, and that's okay because you can sand this off. But you want to
make sure you're filling the gap completely. And if you come back after it's dried and there's a little bit of a divot there, a little recess in the joint, then you can just put some more on. This works a lot better in small layers than in a big glob. Getting some more down here. Wipe off any big globs of excess putty that I can see. Excess putty, I should say. And then we'll give that about 30 minutes to cure, and we'll come out and take a look at it. Okay, it's been about 40 minutes actually, and I'm gonna go ahead and start sanding some of this away. I'm gonna use my medium grit sanding stick. You could, I mean, obviously on this PVC, you could use the more coarse, more aggressive stuff, but I don't want to remove everything that I've just put down. This can be kind of hard to see what's going on, so use your fingers. And I can already see that there's still a divot, a little dip down there. So I'm going to put another layer on. So I'm not going to get too precise with the sanding on that. This one looks a bit better. I think we still have a little bit of a sort of a sunken down area. Having a sandpaper cleaning thing is handy for this, because with this being putty, it will definitely sort of clog up your sanding stick pretty quickly. Okay, let's put another layer on there. You can also take, this is a little round rat tail file, like the other little, it came in the same little kit as the other little files that I used earlier. But with it being round, it really comes in handy to kind of shape the gap itself. But right now it's still sunken down a little too much. So let's go ahead and put another layer on. Happily, this seems to stick to the rubber of the ball pretty well. Otherwise, I'd have to use caulking, which would still be okay. It's just a little different. It's nice to be able to come back and sand things smooth afterwards. I had to clean my pinky off. Now, don't push down when you're doing this, because I just want to remove any extra. I don't want to remove any of the stuff that's down in the area I'm trying to fill. Okay, and I'll be back in about 20 minutes. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now, I'm not trying to cut a 90-degree angle here. I just want to make sure everything is smooth. And once again, I'm using my finger because it's hard to see. A lot of this stuff you won't know for sure until you spray paint this whole thing with the primer and everything's sort of a solid color of gray. And then it'll be really easy to see little imperfections in the surface. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at this side. Well, it looks, I can see like a little line here that makes it look like there's a little bit of a gap there, but there isn't. So I think it's just kind of a dark line that maybe some of the blue of this has rubbed off. Because that's smooth even though it looks like there's a gap. Okay, now there is one part that I forgot to work on, and that is how rough this was. We need to smooth that out, and the same thing in the middle of this. And I could use the same putty, but I'm going to switch over to this Tamiya putty. Let's see for a second here. So I suspect I'm going to have to put more than I need in here and then sand it back. It would be nice if I could just fill in the recesses, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. Okay. And do the same thing with this, but it's going to be harder because it's such a small area. I'm going to try to wipe up any excess now because it's going to be easier to do that than to try and sand it away. I think I'm going to see if I can make a little smaller piece here out of this little piece of tongue depressor. I just cut the end off with a pair of scissors. Okay, now I'll let those cure and we can see what we can do as far as sanding them in, or at least sanding them smooth. This has had plenty of time to cure, so let's take a look at it. Almost looks like just the hot glue in there, but I'm pretty sure that it's the gray. What I have here is I've got a 5/8 dowel. And I also have a, what is it, a 5/16 dowel that I've just glued some 120 grit sandpaper to. And the size really isn't that important, but what's important is that it fits into these, you know, it's, in this case, it's pretty much exactly the internal diameter of this PVC pipe. This one's a little bit smaller than the hole there, but it's fine. We just want something that can get inside there. I'm just going to push it in there and use it to smooth everything out a little bit. Back to my sandpaper cleaner. I think that's going to be good enough. Let me grab a sanding stick as well. I'm just going to use this to clean off any of that putty that's on the outside of this PVC. Okay. So need to repeat the process with this. That looks pretty good actually. And I think that's everything. I think from at this point we can just go to trying to smooth some things out. I've got a seam that runs down here on both sides of the funnel, and I think I've never noticed it before, but I think I've found a seam in the actual rubber ball here. I don't know if I can sand that out in that rubber, but I'll give it a try. And if not, we can always smooth everything out after we've sprayed it with the filler primer. It's also a pretty good idea to scuff up some of this stuff just a little bit. I mean, I don't want to make it super rough because that's just going to make it more work later, but taking the gloss off might not be a bad idea. I've got that seam again on this side. This is a little rough down here, but I wasn't taking much care when I cut this out. All right, the top was already cut, and I just kind of cut the bottom. It's probably not a bad idea to scuff up the inside just a little bit. Okay, I think at this point I'd like to scuff up the PVCs, but I've already done that, so there's no use in doing anything else there. So now we want to clean off any dust. I'm going to do that with some alcohol. Okay, now we can go ahead and spray that. Okay, I've just got this set on a Lazy Susan. It's inside. It's just a little unfoldable spray area. I think it's called the HomeRite Spray Shelter. And you can get these usually in the same part of the hardware store as the spray paint. I haven't used it that often, but it does come in handy. I have my car parked not far from here, so I really don't want to have to use rubbing compound to remove this filler primer like I've done in the past. And once again, this is the 2-in-1 filler primer. You can use, whatever kind of filler primer you want to use. I like the filler primer as opposed to just a regular primer, because if there are any little imperfections in here, it will, when you put a few layers of this on there, you can then sand everything smooth. And I want to do a light coat, and then a second light coat, and then a sort of a heavy wet coat, probably about a minute apart with each of those, however long it takes for them to dry. And I know I say this with every time I use spray paint, but I'm starting about here and I'm going all the way across past it, and then I stop spraying, and then I start spraying again and I come back past it. The reason why I do that is because if you go just back and forth everywhere you stop, now if you go all the way past it back and forth, that's fine. You're just wasting a little bit of paint. But when you're doing something bigger, every place you stop is going to get twice as much paint as where you've gone past it. And that's just why I do it that way. It's not really that important on this particular piece, but it's habit. I'm trying to make sure I get low so I can get underneath on that sphere. Okay, I'm going to turn it upside down and clear out the can, or the nozzle. And then I'm going to wait about a minute, and then we'll put on a second coat. Okay, it's been about a minute, and we're going to do another light coat. And I added some light because it was getting a little dark there. You see a little texture building up here. And that's okay, we'll give it a sanding afterwards. Where there's little bits of imperfections, the filler kind of builds up there. So it'll need a little sanding afterwards, but that was the plan anyway. Another light coat. Okay, we'll wait another minute and then we'll put on one heavier, sort of a wet, glossy coat. Okay, it's been about a minute, so let's go ahead and put on a nice, thick, wet coat. You want to put it on pretty heavy, but you want to be careful not to get any runs. And if you just keep shooting one area, it's eventually going to either run or the whole side of it will sag down, and that's definitely not what you want. So some of these areas, I'm not sure what we've got going on here, but after this, I'll give this a good 30 minutes to dry, and then I'll go back and sand it, and I can smooth out any of these areas. Looks like maybe it's not getting down into some spots, or it's being resisted there by some residue of something, but we'll be able to sort of sand down into those areas, and then when we go back and put the next coat on, it'll sort of fix everything. The more coats of filler primer you put on, the more things, the larger the divot or imperfection that you can sand out. Of course, we also have to remember this is Boba Fett, so it's going to be beat up in the end. And disappointingly, the paint on these thrusters is kind of blah. I really kind of wanted to go in and do a sort of a rainbow of, where metal gets tempered into different colors. But in the actual jetpack, it's kind of just painted gray, which is a little disappointing. All right, I'm going to give that a good 30 to 40 minutes to completely dry, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Okay, let's take a look at this. Definitely rough through here. Oh, by the way, I was looking over the instructions on the filler primer just to make sure that my 30 minutes was correct. Need a little more there, looks like. And it said to wait 10 minutes in between all of the layers. So first layer, then wait 10 minutes, second layer, wait 10 minutes, and then third layer and wait 30 minutes before you start sanding. So I was a little quick on that, but I'm pretty sure it was completely dry. So I'm gonna get some sort of light sanding to do just to take off these little bumps that are everywhere. The sphere itself looks pretty good. I was expecting to see this ridge, this little seam, a lot better, which I can, if you can even see it, there is a hint of it there, but that's it. So I don't know how much we'll be able to sand that away, just because I can't hardly see it. But I've got definitely do not want to use the coarse on this. I've got sort of a medium, and it has two sides. One side's definitely coarser than the other one, and I'm going to use the less, the more fine side on if I'm wanting to remove material like these rough areas or this seam. And I'm not pushing down, letting this rest on there, and I'm going in a circular motion. I think now maybe you can see the seam a little better. I'll use the coarser side of this for this area here. That's how lightly I'm holding this. Now there's a seam here, which I might want to go back and add some putty in that just to fill that little gap. I couldn't really see it before, but now that everything is gray, it's pretty obvious. And this bottom edge is kind of rough. I would, there are these little rubber pieces that slide onto edges like this that, they're kind of they're, almost like weather stripping. They have a U channel in there that'll slide over this. That might be a pretty good time to use. That would make this a little bit thicker on the bottom as well. I don't know that I'm going to worry about it, but that's always an idea if you don't like how thin this looks. I would not skimp on the smoothing out. The smoother that you get all of this, the more it's going to look like metal once we paint the silver. Now, Unfortunately, after we paint it silver, we're going to have to paint over it again with kind of a gray color in most of it. There'll be some silver showing through, but for the most part, it's going to be gray, unfortunately. But we want that silver to really look like metal, so that in the areas where there are scratches and chips exposed, it's going to be believable. Okay, I'm going to finish smoothing this until I don't feel this rough texture that's on here, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, this is as smooth as I really need it to be. You see these sort of light colored areas? You might be thinking that that's where I've gotten cut through most of the paint, but if you remember, this is black under here, so I think that's just some of the dust from the paint kind of settling into little pores that are in the other rest of the paint. But this is not perfectly smooth, but it feels pretty smooth. If I was going to leave this bare metal or do what I originally wanted to do, which was to sort of paint that tempered multicolor effect on here, then I would keep going until I basically took care of all of these little, I guess they call it orange peel. I don't think this goes to the, all the way to orange peel, but it's basically that. And, I would take all of that and make it smooth. However, this is going to end up painted mostly with matte gray paint, so it's really not that necessary. And I'm going to move on to the rest of this, where I've still got some fairly rough areas. Also, the advantage of painting this gray is that now I can see where there's areas that are not smooth at all. This is obviously some of the putty that we used to fill in here, somehow got out here. That, or it could be a little bit of super glue. Either way, I'll need to sand that off. Well, you don't have to. Once again, this is Boba Fett's. It's probably got mud and stuff stuck to it all over, so you can also hide things like that that way. You paint that brown in the end, and that's a piece of mud splatter on there. But I'm going to go ahead and try to smooth everything out. Now, my sanding sticks are washable, so I was able to kind of wet sand with these. So dip this in some water as kind of a lubricant, and also it keeps the sandpaper from clogging so easily. But it's not necessary to do that. And you can smooth this out until you start to see the surface that's below the paint appear. Once it starts to appear, then you've got to stop. You don't have any more area that you can smooth out at that point. This is quite smooth, but I can feel little spots that are almost like a piece of dust or something stuck to the surface of what it feels like. So I'm very lightly going over those. Be very careful when you get around corners, because if I run this across that corner right there, it's definitely going to take all of the paint off, or all of the primer off. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my finest, which is more of a polisher. Actually, my fingers don't feel any sharpness to this surface at all, but it does smooth things out. I'm kind of going to go over everything and bring it to as much of almost like a shine. I guess you can see where it's starting to get a bit of a shine to it. It's becoming more and more polished. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some of that putty, the one that has a little point that I used around here, and I'm just going to go around this juncture between this piece and that piece, and then smooth it out with my finger. and then we'll go back to the spray booth. I may actually sand that a little bit, just depends on how smoothly I put it on there. I've got everything sanded down. I put the putty down here and have that all sanded smooth. So now I'm just going to go ahead and put 3 more coats of the filler primer on here, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, I put 3 more coats on here. I also, made sure that I got under there. Basically, I had to set this on a pedestal so that I could get underneath there easier. So I made sure I got that, and then I went ahead and shot the inside as well. I almost forgot that, but I remembered at the last minute. So that's also, I've gotten some paint on the inside of that. I also went ahead and took that pink, the super fine sanding stick, and did that sort of polish on here where everything's almost polished. And so I'm pretty much finished sanding, but I did want to go ahead, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and remove the paint off of the washer, at least the parts that I can easily get to. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm just going to use sort of the medium grit. My fear is I don't want to, this is pretty close to being even with this outside edge, so I don't want to remove the paint off of the sphere. Obviously, if I really wanted to not get any paint onto this, I could have masked it off. Although it's not that difficult to sand this off. I can't remember now if this gets painted a color or if it stays metal. I'll have to look at some photos. Almost there. The washer itself isn't perfectly flat, so it kind of rounds off on the edges, so I'm going to have to go in and clean that up a little bit. Okay. I'm not going to worry about getting down to those little grooves. Now what I'm going to do is take some more of this alcohol and just clean everything off. I'm just getting rid of any dust, any paint dust where the sanding has caused. Like that was proper English. Okay. Now I'm going to give that, I don't know, 5 minutes for all the alcohol to evaporate. And then we'll go on to painting. It's been a couple of minutes and everything has evaporated. And we can go ahead and paint this, our silver. Now, on this one, I painted this one with this mirror, which I think is probably the best thing that I've tried as far as just a silver paint. But I'm almost out of this, and I've never actually tried this. This is normally when I find this, it's in a pin form, and you can almost find these pins anywhere. It's a Moloto liquid chrome, and you can find this at pretty much any hobby store. Well, I mean, you never know, but I found it at both Hobby Lobby and Michael's and a couple of other hobby shops that do models and stuff. So these are pretty common. This is just the filler, sort of the bulk filler for these pins. But I've never tried to brush this on, so I thought I'd go ahead and try it. I've got pretty much a full container here. So if you cannot find the mirror, and I think you have to buy this online from, just do a search for mirror paint. You're not going to find this in a store as far as I've ever found. So you can pretty much get this at hobby stores. Well, I'll say that. You can find the pins at hobby stores. I had to order this online from Amazon. Just search for bulk refill, pin refill for Moloto. Let me see if I can find the brand spelled out. It's Moloto. SevenCatStudios.com. I shook this up earlier, but let me go ahead and shake it up now just to make sure. Until I found the mirror, this was definitely my go-to. The pins were my go-to for chrome silver paint. And as you can see, it kind of looks like mercury in there. It's the only other paint that I've found that is that metallic. I've never tried brushing it on though. So let's see what we get. This is definitely stickier than the mirror is. The mirror comes in very small containers, but I will say that a small amount of it spreads for a long, you can cover a lot of ground with it, whereas this is not quite that easy to paint. I think we're gonna have to use a lot more paint. But that's okay because this is also a lot cheaper than the mirror. I think that little container right here is like $45 or something like that. But I will say I've had that for a couple of years now, and I've painted a lot of things with it. You want to be fairly smooth with your brush strokes here because we don't want this to look like paint. We want it to look like a metal structure. And this might take a couple of coats. I have seen people airbrush with this paint and it works quite well. Need a smaller brush for this, but heck, I'll go ahead and paint these. Yeah, it looks like when you first put it on, where the paint's nice and thick, it has a really nice chrome effect, but as you keep brushing it and it gets thinner and thinner, I think it's less effective, so I think we'll get a couple of coats on here. But it's still not bad at all, especially when it's wet. Yeah, this may just be more things that are going to make it flop. I'm going to have to get shorter though. Now this doesn't have to be perfect, so if there are some brush strokes, that's fine because most of this is getting covered up. You do want to get to this and paint it early because this is going to take several days. You know, kind of like with the jetpack earlier in the very first part of the build where I kind of rushed it a little bit. You want to give this several days to dry completely. And by several days, I mean a week to 2 weeks possibly. Now I'm going to try to, I have a fairly sensitive oven that's quite accurate. So I'm going to put this in convection oven for about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, you know, there are summers here that are hotter than that. And see if that speeds things up a little bit. In the past, I would have painted this a glossy black before I painted the silver on there, but I don't think that's necessary, especially for the mirror and probably not for this. But once again, we'll find out. And after this is really, really well dried, we'll go in with some liquid frisket and mask off scratches and areas where the paint's going to flake off. And then we'll paint everything, and then we take that paint off of the frisket, you know, we peel the frisket up, and we'll have, you know, damaged areas to this where the silver will shine through, hopefully. So we're going to let this dry for quite a while, and then, you know, probably at least an hour,
and make sure it's not tacky, and then we'll come back and put another coat on.
Okay, it's been about an hour and this is completely dry to the touch. Let's go ahead and see if we can put another coat on here.
I think I'm gonna do this the opposite. This time I'll do the bottom first. Trying to maintain a sort of a wet coat here. I don't know if you can hear it, but suddenly it has started raining, which is not ideal for painting anything. If I start to feel any drag at all on this brush, I'm getting more paint. I think a bigger brush would be better, but I'm almost out of brushes. You can get a nice good coat on there. It has a nice effect. I mean, to be honest, the whole thing looks pretty good. Definitely is a reminder as to why this was my favorite for a long time. Although this is, like I said, the first time I've ever tried to brush it. The pens, I think for a silver chrome pen, it's easily the best. But I also remember trying to do larger areas using that pen, and it has a tendency to dry up. So sometimes you have to come back with a new pen, or just do multiple coats after leaving it for a couple of hours. Having a hard time seeing where I painted and where I haven't, so I guess it was actually pretty good in the first coat. I'm not making a huge difference here. Okay, I think I'm going to bring this inside so that the humidity is a little better. All right, I'll let this dry for a while, then we'll take a look at it. Here is the final result for the silver. Now this did spend a couple of hours in my oven set to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That was on convection oven. And I'm actually very impressed with this. If anything, this might be a tiny bit more, looking like steel than this even, although they're really quite similar. One difference though is that I can see the brush strokes on here a lot more than on here. This looks like it could have easily been airbrushed, even though I used a brush on it. This I don't know if you can see it on camera, but you can see all of the little airbrushes on here, which of course would be fine for this because we're going to end up painting most of this anyway. You could even theoretically go ahead and not paint the silver at all and just go back with the Moloto little pen to draw in the little areas where you want it to look like the paint has flaked off. But this will look, the way we're doing it will look slightly more realistic. You notice I put the nut on here. So when we actually mount these, we will drill a hole on the side here. This will go in there. We go on the inside with a socket and tighten this up. I'll put this on here so we don't lose it. So I think if you're going to use the Moloto and you have an airbrush, I would probably go that route. I think, if you didn't have these brush strokes, I think this would look absolutely fantastic. The mirror, now I will say this, I only used one coat of mirror paint on this as opposed to I used 2 coats of the Moloto, although I couldn't really tell that it was doing much on the second coat. But that might have been, one of the differences. This also looks fantastic. Also, I can tell from the texture on here that I spent more time sort of polishing this one when I was sanding, which is not uncommon for me where I'm doing a project for the camera. I do a little better job than when I'm just doing it. I did not paint the inside of this one.
because this is going to have a completely different painted effect. It won't look metallic at all. It'll look more carbon scored, you know, sort of carbon buildup and stuff. And this part here, I'm not going to draw that onto here until we start doing the actual paint treatment on here for the final product. Then I'll go ahead and draw that on there and paint that in accordingly. But with this done, let's go ahead and work on this version, or I should say this version right here. Like always, if you found this video helpful or entertaining, like that's going to happen, but if it's helpful, please like, subscribe. I'm pretty sure you're probably already subscribed at this point, but if not, please subscribe. And most importantly, you know, leave a comment. Doesn't matter what it is, just say hi. I mean, if you have a valid question, obviously, you know, or any question, go ahead and ask it. I'll be happy to answer it as best as I can. So please interact any way you can. We're getting to a really exciting part of the build, and I really can't wait till the next video. It's going to be a lot of fun. So until next time, thanks.